When tech mogul Marcus Sterling stood in line at a humble food cart in Portland, the owner treated him like any other customer. But when he whispered, "Do you remember?" everything changed. This is the story of a forgotten promise, a shared sandwich from 15 years ago, and how 3 simple words would reunite 2 souls who never forgot each other's kindness. The morning mist clung to the streets of Portland's Pearl District like a familiar embrace. At 6:45 a.m., the city was just beginning to stir, coffee shops grinding their first beans, streetcars humming along their tracks, and early commuters hurrying past with purpose. On the corner of 12th and Burnside, a bright turquoise food cart called Elena's Kitchen was already serving its first customers of the day. Hand-painted sunflowers decorated its sides, and the smell of fresh tortillas and sizzling chorizo drew a steady line of regulars. Marcus Sterling stood third in line, his charcoal wool coat pristine despite the drizzle. One hand gripped his phone displaying dozens of unread messages, while the other ran through his dark hair in exhaustion. The weight of a sleepless night and impending merger negotiations pressed down on his shoulders. For someone whose face graced magazine covers and whose company's stock price moved markets, this corner felt refreshingly anonymous, real, unfiltered. As he stepped forward, ready to order, a warm voice called out from the cart. "Buenos dias, everyone. Sorry, but we only have 2 breakfast burritos left this morning."
Before we continue, please comment below where you are watching from, and don't forget to subscribe.
Marcus opened his mouth to speak, but the voice continued gently. "I believe Mrs. Chun was here first," said the woman inside, stepping into view. She wore a yellow apron decorated with dancing peppers, her long black hair tied back with a colorful bandana. "Same as always, Senora." Behind Marcus stood an elderly Asian woman with a walker, her face lighting up at being remembered. "You're too kind, Elena." "Of course. Extra salsa verde, no onions, coming right up." Marcus turned, studying the older woman he'd somehow missed. Elena, the cart owner, leaned forward with genuine warmth. Elena Rodriguez looked to be in her late 20s, with expressive brown eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. Her smile wasn't performative. It was simply present. "Well," Marcus said quietly, amused despite himself. "I suppose that's fair." Without turning around, Elena responded matter-of-factly while wrapping Mrs. Chen's burrito. "My abuela always said the kitchen serves hearts before wallets. Doesn't matter if you're the governor or a gardener." She said it naturally, without sarcasm. She had no idea who he was. Or perhaps she did and simply didn't care. Marcus found himself chuckling genuinely. It had been months since someone looked past his position, literal or metaphorical. "Then I'll take whatever's left," he said. Elena turned then, meeting his eyes for the first time. "Lucky for you, we never run out of coffee. And I make it strong enough to wake the dead." She handed him a simple white cup, steam rising from rich, dark brew. No corporate logo, no branded sleeve, just honest coffee from someone who cared about making it right. Their fingers brushed briefly as he took the cup. Her hands were warm, real, bearing a thin silver bracelet and the faint scent of cinnamon. As he stepped aside for the next customer, Marcus found himself studying Elena as she worked. She moved with practiced efficiency, but there was something else, genuine care in every interaction. The way she remembered how Mr. Rodriguez liked his eggs, how she slipped extra fruit to the college student who clearly couldn't afford much. She reminded him of something, someone from long ago. "Do you remember?" he whispered, barely audible above the morning bustle. Elena paused, a slight furrow appearing between her brows. "I'm sorry." Marcus smiled softly, shaking his head. "Nothing. You just remind me of someone I used to know." She offered a gentle smile before turning back to her griddle. Elena had no idea she'd just served coffee to Marcus Sterling, billionaire, tech innovator, and the same hungry teenager she'd once shared her lunch with at a community center 15 years ago. She didn't remember yet, but he did. For 3 mornings in a row, Marcus returned to Elena's kitchen. Each day, he found reasons to linger. The coffee was excellent, the atmosphere was authentic, the neighborhood was convenient for his commute. Elena began to notice patterns. He always ordered black coffee, never food. He stood slightly apart from other customers, observing more than participating. But there was something in his eyes, a familiar sadness she couldn't place. "You know," she said on the 3rd morning, handing him his usual, Most people eventually try the food. Are you just really committed to liquid breakfast? Marcus smiled. I'm not much of a morning eater. Or you're afraid my cooking will ruin you for everything else, Elena teased. That's probably closer to the truth. Their conversations became a quiet ritual. Elena noticed how he always hesitated before ordering, as if wanting to say something more. And Marcus watched everything. How she saved day-old pastries for the homeless man who came by each afternoon. How she knew every regular's name and story. One evening, after closing her cart, Elena sat in her small apartment, sorting through a wooden box of memories. Old photos, ticket stubs from movies she'd loved, and at the bottom, a folded napkin, brown and soft with age. She opened it carefully. In faded blue ink, barely legible. Thank you for seeing me. M. Her breath caught. She remembered the boy from the community center, thin, quiet, with eyes that held too much pain for someone so young. She'd been volunteering in the lunch program when she noticed him sitting alone, staring at an empty plate. Without thinking, she'd torn her own sandwich in half and sat beside him. He hadn't spoken much, but when she'd given him that napkin with her phone number and a note of encouragement, something in his face had shifted. Could it be? Across the city, Marcus sat in his minimalist penthouse, holding an identical napkin. His version read, "You matter more than you know. Don't give up, Elena." Those words had carried him through foster homes, scholarships, and the early days of building his company. In his darkest moments, he'd pulled out that napkin and remembered that someone had seen worth in him when he couldn't see it himself. Now he was almost certain he'd found her again. The autumn rain arrived suddenly, transforming Portland's gentle drizzle into a proper downpour. Elena was outside her cart, wrestling with the wind-whipped awning when a familiar voice cut through the storm. "Let me help." Marcus appeared beside her, his expensive suit already soaked, dark hair plastered to his forehead. Together, they secured the canopy and moved the outdoor tables to safety. Under the cart's small overhang, Elena pushed wet strands of hair from her face. "You're drenched." "So are you," he replied, still holding part of the tarp they'd been fighting. The rain drummed steadily above them, creating an intimate cocoon of sound. Elena studied his face, really looked at him for the first time. "Can I ask you something?" she said softly. Marcus nodded. "Do you believe one moment can change someone's entire life?" The question hung between them like a bridge neither quite dared to cross. "Ido," Marcus replied quietly. "I think sometimes a single act of kindness can save someone's whole world." Elena's breath caught. Something in his voice, the way he said save, it tugged at a memory just beyond reach. "I was 17, Marcus continued, his voice barely audible above the rain. "Living in group housing. I'd aged out of foster care and was working 3 jobs to afford community college. One day, I went to the center for lunch, but I didn't have money for food." Elena's heart began to race. This girl was volunteering there. She had long black hair, kind eyes, and she was wearing a yellow shirt with a sunflower on it. His gaze met hers. She saw me sitting alone and shared her sandwich. Before she left, she gave me a napkin with her number and a note that said I mattered. Tears gathered in Elena's eyes. "Marcus," she whispered, "you remember. I never forgot that boy," she said, her voice breaking. "I wondered about you for years. Whether you were okay, whether you'd found your way." Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a worn piece of paper. Elena did the same, retrieving hers from her apron pocket. They unfolded their napkins simultaneously, his message to her, hers to him, both carried across 15 years of separate lives that had somehow led them back to each other. "You saved my life that day," Marcus said, "not just with food, but by seeing me when I felt invisible. Elena stepped closer. And you saved mine by letting me help. I was lost back then too, didn't know if kindness mattered in a world that felt so cruel." The rain continued to fall, but neither noticed. They had found each other again, not as the broken teenagers they'd been, but as the people they'd helped each other become. 6 months later, Portland's newspaper ran a feature story that made national headlines. Tech billionaire partners with local food cart owner for community kitchen initiative. But the real story wasn't in the business pages. It was in the small details nobody wrote about. Marcus Sterling never forgot the hungry teenager he'd once been. Elena Rodriguez never stopped believing that feeding people was about more than food. It was about nourishing souls. Some love stories begin with grand gestures. Others begin with half a sandwich and the revolutionary act of seeing someone when they feel invisible. The best ones, though, begin with kindness and come full circle when you least expect it.